We continue with the Moreh Nevuchim from yesterday, okay? Yesterday we did two things, again. The first thing we did yesterday was we introduced what I find to be wonderful. I love this philosophy stuff. Where you have a machlokes between the Rambam and the Rasag, whether it makes more sense to say that the Eibishter made the world imperfect and we need to perfect it, which is the position of the Rasag, based on a medrash, mind you, or to say that it's impossible to say that the Eibishter made an imperfect world. You have to therefore say we cannot handle the perfection that he gave us and it needs to be curtailed. The bottom line is you have to have a bris. The bris is a tikkun, according to the Rasag, because it needs tikkun, according to the Rambam, because we have to curb the Yetzer Hara. That's basically what he said. And we talked about this, Bekitzer, that the Rambam is always in the middle. The Rambam is never an extremist. And if you understand the Rambam, you understand that the Rambam is not in the middle because he's a compromiser. The Rambam is in the middle because the Rambam believes that the middle is truth. So the Rambam is not going to say that a person shouldn't have Hanoah. The Rambam is going to say that Hanoah is not allowed to control you, you have to control Hanoah. And to be honest, it's easier not to have Hanoah than to have controlled Hanoah. If you understand human nature, the most difficult place to be is in the middle. To be competitive and not too competitive. To be jealous and not vindictive is more difficult than not being jealous at all. In other words, those three midas, chesed, which is pleasure, gvura, which means intensity, strength, competitiveness, and tiferes, which things should be beautiful, to not do them at all is easier than to do them in a controlled way. And that's the position of the Rambam and all over. It's his approach. So the Rambam says you have to make sure you're a balabayas over the taiva, and the taiva is not a balabayas over you, and this is why you have to have a bris. Now we read the second time of the Rambam. This is wonderful. It's really common sense, but when you read it in the Rambam, it's very special. We're on the third page, second column, where you have the two vertical lines. In other words, it's halfway down the second column on page 3, which is also page Shin Tzadikas. V'yesh b'mila l'daiti oid inyan achar chashuv me'ed. In my opinion, says the Rambam, there's something else very, very important about Bris Mila. V'hu, and it's the following. This is so interesting. Sheyehu kol ba'alei hashkafa hazu. The purpose of a bris is that all people who share this philosophy of life, which is of course Yidden, kolaymen, in other words, Shevre Yichud Hashem, all people who prescribe to the idea that Hashem is one, and of course I hope you know that the opposite of Hashem is one doesn't mean that Hashem is many. Hashem is many is a stupid idea. The opposite of Hashem is one is that Hashem is not fully in control. One doesn't mean that there's one God and not two gods. One means there's one boss of the earth and not two bosses of the earth. And we believe, Torah believes, one of the human Emunah, Achdus Hashem. Right? The first ikir is Yediyas Hashem. The second ikir is Yediyas HaAchdus, that there's one master, one Balabayas. So the Rambam writes that when you have a group of people who share a like-minded philosophy, it's correct, lahem, for them, that they should have Simin Echad Gufni HaKoilelem, a mark in their body that unites them. Having a bris, the fact that the Jewish people have a bris, gives Jewish people a commonality. In the footnote 77, Rabbi Yosef Kapach suggests that instead of the word simin, he uses the word ois, a sign, an indicator. And of course, if the Jewish people are distinct because they make a bris milah, someone who's not a Yid, could come along and claim that he is a Yid, and he's a foreigner, he's outside, because he has no bris. Lefi, considering the fact that it's possible that a non-Jew would argue that he's Jewish, would claim that he's Jewish, to achieve a certain benefit, or in order to infiltrate the members of this religion to undermine them. Okay, but when the requirement to get into the Jewish chevre is a bris milah, it's kind of it's kind of expensive. I want you to know something, and I don't want to talk about this bariches, but I do want to talk about it bekitzer. There is an issue with gerus today, across the board. Conversion today is a big issue. Okay? A person who wanted to become a Jew 100 years ago, it really wasn't such a big deal because nobody wanted to be Jewish. Jews were downtrodden, Jews were oppressed, Jews were hated. And why would one? So if someone wanted to be a Yid, they wanted to be a Yid because they're in it for the right reasons. Today, in many places in the world, in South America, in Asia, in Africa, in the Mediterranean region, in Asia Minor, there are many goyim who want to become Jewish for the simple reason that in an instant they raise their standard of living. If you are a goy living in this neighborhood and you go through gear, what happens? There's so many material benefits. It's unbelievable. So, Geirus is a huge, when you live in a world like we live in, with Baruch Hashem, the Jewish people are safe and relatively speaking well-to-do, it's almost impossible to ascertain that a person is going through gear for the right reasons. And the Rambam writes that in the times of David and Shlomo, they outlawed gear. There's an argument, there are communities of Jews, by the way, specifically the Iraqis, they do not accept Gedim, period. The philosophy is, you can accept Gedim when being a Jew is expensive.
From generation they don't?
No, from now. I'm saying, since they left Iraq, they made a Gezeda 80, 90 years ago, people have a taina to them. They do not accept Gedim. Finished. One of the Gedolim a long time ago here in America made this takana, and you could understand it. I know friends who were shluchim in South America. They're no longer South America because Colombia and places like that, it's very hard to be a shliach, who told me that they would sit at shiurim with, with a gayed or gayedis who married Jewish because they married rich, and they'll talk about Yoshka like he's another Navi, and they say, wait a minute, you're a Jew. And they Pashit don't get it. Because the grounds of the conversion was Pashit marrying up. Now the halacha is, when somebody becomes a Gayed for the wrong reasons, they're 100% a Yid. Understand, Gaydus, there's no such thing as not glad kosher when it comes to Gaydus. There's no half Gaydus. It either is or it isn't a Giyur. And it's a big problem. The Rambam talks to this idea. When a Goy wants to become a Yid, it has to have a cost. The idea that you have to make a Bris sobers many people. No, it's a cost in life. It makes you pause. Like cutting a sensitive part of your flesh, for example. What I'm saying is, when Yidden suffered, when Yidden lived in just in Eastern Europe, when Yidden lived in Russia, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, even in Western Europe, if a guy wanted to become a Yid, it was probably because he was interested in the Eibishter. It just wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it.
Also, Yidden were hated at that time. It was hard to
Correct.
live as a Yid.
Correct.
They had to hide as a Yid.
Correct. Well, enough to hide, but it was not fun.
Wow.
Today, even in Russia, especially in Russia, a Russian guy or a Ukrainian guy becomes a Jew, automatically he has at his disposal Pashat Gashmias that he couldn't have dreamed about. So how do you determine if the Gaydus is Hashem Shamayim? And again, once they're in, they're in. Once they're in, they're in. That's the halach. Once they're in, they're in. It's a tricky thing. And so the Rambam says, this is an explanation for Bris Mila. It separates Yidden from Goyim. Okay? Umay says, and this act of Bris Mila, lo yaseyu, a person would not do it, mitech deya beruda, with a clear mind. It's too invasive. It's too difficult to do. Ke'enzu shrita b'sheik or kaviyah b'zraya, talking about tattoos. This is not just a cut on your thigh or a burn on your hand. Eladava shahaya kosher ma'id ma'id. It was something which was very, very difficult to do. And remember, a long time ago, they didn't have the same anesthetics that we have today. Okay? And as a consequence, it was, the Rambam says, having separated Yidden from non-Yidden by the Bris was advantageous. It separated Yidden from non-Yidden, and it also gave Yidden a common bond. V'yadu agam, in addition, this is still part of this second idea, erech ha'ahava v'ha'ezra ha'mispatchim, the worth of the love and the support that develops bein bnei adam, amongst people, asher kulam be'eis echad. When people share a symbol, when people share a common bond, there's automatically a mutually inclusive support. I mean, we're from Jews, right? We're Lubavitchers. There's all kinds of Lubavitchers. There's all kinds of people who live in Crown Heights. When people share a bond, they provide support for each other. Sometimes it looks confused. Sometimes it doesn't look like support. Bottom line is we look after one another. You know how families operate. How families operate? They fight with each other like cats and dogs. They insult each other. But if someone from the outside steps in, all of a sudden, it's a whole other thing. The Rambam is saying, having a symbol that represents our commonality is very, very important and binding. And I'll share something cute, meaningful with you. You know what used to be? You know what's the modern equivalent of a bris? I mean, what the Rambam is writing today is hard because such a high percentage of goyim in the Western world do a bris also. You know what would be the modern equivalent of a bris today? And it's no longer true, but it was true for a very long time. Yiddish.
What does that mean?
Yiddish. Rabbi Fuchs, I had a teacher who I loved. Name was Rabbi Fuchs. And whenever he would see me in the street, I learned by him in 1976, Toshan Lamed Vav. And whenever I would see him in the street, he would stop and he would tell me stories. And I wrote some of the stuff down. He told me once that he was from the boys who went east, right? We all know they were in Shanghai. What we don't know is that before they went to Shanghai, they were in Japan.
My great-great-grandfather.
That's right. He's not your great-great-grandfather. He's your great-grandfather.
Yeah, sorry.
Rabbi Fuchs, right? He was he was a special Jew. He was so humble, it was disgusting. His humility was an embarrassment to the Jewish people. He was so humble. He was not normal. He was such a sweet man. So they left Poland in 1939, 1940. They were in the mainland of Japan. I mean, the mainland of Japan. Japan is islands. The whole Japan is islands. Until December 7, 1941, which was a year and a half later. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, every foreigner was made to leave. And the Japanese had already conquered huge parts of Manchuria and China. So they plopped them into Shanghai, which was called an open city. It was an international city. The Japanese were terrible. But that's another story. So he lived in Japan. And one of the islands of Japan is called Kobe, Japan, for a long time. He says it was a Friday night. He's walking in the street, and a man is driving in a Cadillac. Then rolls down a window and says to him in perfect Yiddish, "Was macht a Yid?" The hemshich of that story was the guy offered him a ride. He Pasha didn't even know that it was Shabbos. He says, "The Shabbos." He says, "But give me your address. I'll walk over." He walked over to this man's house. He became friends with this family. He had a boy and a girl. He started to tutor them. Both of them became frum and built Yiddish mishpachas. And it started with a few words in Yiddish by a not from man. Was macht a Yid? For many Jews all over the world, being able to speak a few words of Yiddish in some cases could save your life. Yiddish used to be the equivalent of the bris that the Rambam is here describing. It identified us, it separated us from everybody else, and it created a bond. That's real. The Rambam is saying that's an explanation for bris, because it's a physical thing that's difficult to do. It identifies us, it brands us, to use a term of business, and it distinguishes us from everybody else.
Yiddish existed back then?
What, 100 years ago? No, the Rambam is saying that the Bris Mila is the symbol. I'm saying a modern day equivalent of the Bris Mila would be Yiddish. It's no longer true. The Rebbe Tzachaya Mushki used to say that people should speak Yiddish, and this is what she would say. You have no idea how many lives were saved because people could talk Yiddish. Just say a few words in Yiddish.
What is that like?
Because people identify.
Right.
You know the old joke, in World War I, there were Jews fighting on both sides. So a German officer, a German soldier is about to be bayoneted by a Russian, and he says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, and the Russian says Hashem Echad. And naturally, he doesn't kill him, but these things actually happened.
Wow.
They're not just Sheina Maises, this actually happened. Okay, let's continue. Says the Rambam, it acts as a covenant and a miftach. Miftach means some kind of a security, a support. I'm sorry.
Sorry, what acts as a support?
The bris, the fact that we share a physical bris, it creates a bond between people, which translates into a mutual support. And it's true. It's true. Jews are funny people. We're such political people, but we do still. I remember once there was a guy on the radio, an Italian guy named Bob Grant. He liked Jews, but he was one of those people who he bashed everybody. He didn't like what you said on any issue. He told you exactly what he thought. So an Italian calls up, very clearly an Italian with a thick Italian, and he starts to speak in an anti-Semitic way, and Bob Grant didn't tolerate that, so he screams at him in Italian English. What's the problem? It bothers you that they stick together? We could stick together. What's the problem? It bothers you that they stick together. We could stick together. Never then. You don't know how. So we're going to hold it against them. What's the problem? Let's read. This bris, bris, it's the covenant that Avraham Avinu was given and established. Al hadeya b'yichud Hashem. What makes us Jewish? What does the bris symbolize? That we believe in one God, in the master of heaven and earth. The same applies to Kol Hanimel, any person who was circumcised. It's very good that you're all looking inside and following with me. I'm 3 lines at the end of the page. Harehu nichnas bevris Avraham. He's entering to the covenant of Avraham. Bris Avraham. Shnei Zalman. Bris Avraham, the covenant of Avraham. It's yours. Umischaye bebrisei, and he obligates himself through this bris to join in the belief in the oneness of God. That Hashem is our God, and our children after Him. Okay, so the bris becomes a physical symbol of our identity. It creates a loyalty, it creates a bonding, and it also identifies what we believe. We know the old story about a Jew who runs away from Israel to go live in Tasmania because he wants to be an atheist. His kid goes to a Catholic school and he comes home from school and he tells his father that he learned that there's a Av and a Ben and a Ruach HaKodesh. I heard the Rebbe say these words, that there's 3. So his father grabs him by the shirt and says, listen, Jeremy, there's only one God and we don't believe in Him. Okay, that's a Jew for you. Turn to page 4 now. I want you to know, says the Rambam, this reason that I'm giving you now, the idea of having a physical symbol that unites us and defines us is as important as the first reason I gave. Perhaps even more important. In other words, some people are going to say, the first thing that Rambam says, by the way, if you listen to Darshanim, when they talk about Bris and they quote the Rambam, everybody quotes the first thing. That the Bris is Pasha to weaken the Taiva. The second idea you almost don't hear. Says, Ram, I want you to know that I think that the second reason is equally as important as the first. The idea of becoming a member of a group, being identified by that group, and sharing a belief is as important as Bittul HaTaiva, or more important as Bittul HaTaiva. That's it. Now, and then he concludes. I'm reading on. Ushleimus mitzvah, the completeness, the wholeness, the perfection, the preciseness of this mitzvah. And preserving it for future generations. Loiniskaima has not been sustained. Because we do the bris at such a tender age, at such a young age, that's why people still do it. In other words, if we did the bris at an older age, it'd be too difficult. Because we do it at such a young age, that's why the bris still exists. Says Rambam, there's 3 reasons why doing it at a tender age it preserves the continuity of bris. And again, I want to repeat what I told you 2 days ago. Of all the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, the mitzvah most likely for Jewish people to keep is bris. That's a fact. More people do a bris than make a Pesach Seder. More people do a bris than make a Chanukah Menorah. More people do a bris than go to Temple Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And it's the mitzvah that makes the least sense. The only explanation is because it goes to the neshama. In other words, you're not... The logic of bris is that it's of supra-logic. It's above logic. There's no question about it. So the Rambam now says 3 reasons why doing it when we're young is advantageous. Number 1, if we would allow the child to wait till he grows up, simple. If a kid is 13, like the Arabs do it, or an adult, he says, you know what, I'm not going through with it. We do it when we're babies, so all the children go through the bris. Hashniya, number 2, it's very simple. Babies do not have the same neurological development as adults do, and there's pashat less pain. I think that that's a scientific fact, not just a philosophical fact. Kitzar HaGodel has the pain of an adult. Machmas rachus oirai, his skin is very soft. V'cheleshes demyena, his imagination, his sense of what's happening to him is weaker. Ki hagodel yifchad, when people experience pain, and along with the pain they experience fear, the pain is worse. V'yiksha adavar alav, the pain becomes worse. When you anticipate something bad happening to you, the bad becomes worse because of your imagination. The baby doesn't know what's going to happen, so they don't have that aspect of the pain. And Vashlishis, the third is Sha'akotan, Mamode kal eitzel hera v'zman leidasa. You can argue against this if you wish, but this is what the Rambam says. The love of parents to children grows over time. When a baby is brand new, a baby is just born, certainly a father, the love that they have for their child is less when they're 8 days old than when they're a year or two. And the Rambam is arguing, if we would delay the bris, the parents would object to it. The first reason is if you delay the bris, the child is going to accept to it. The second reason is, at an early age, there's less pain. The third reason is, as the child gets older, the parents are going to be reluctant to do the bris. Parents love their children because they develop a sense of who their child is. When the child is 8 days old, they have very little sense who that child is, and therefore, for a father, yes. For a mother, I don't think so.
What about the idea of Yisrael, the dafke when a kid is little?
Okay, we have to accept that the Rambam doesn't necessarily have to agree with every idea and every other shita of Torah. Again, I'm telling him that I think that this is true of fathers. I don't think this is true of mothers. The Rambam seems to be saying that it's true even of mothers. In other words, you don't understand the Rambam, that's okay. But you can't change the Rambam. This is his opinion.
And you could explain it even from others easily, no? But in the beginning it's just such a technical thing. There's no time even for the idea of enjoying the baby.
Oh, I don't agree.
It's your kid.
I don't agree at all. What happens to females, even amongst animals, and certainly what happens to human beings, mothers, is incredible. Their chemicals, the hormones in their bodies, make them so unbelievably dedicated. They'll give their life away for their children. It's hard to see it. The Rambam is saying it, but it's hard to see it.
Saying that they don't love in the beginning, or that it just grows?
No, that it grows. So it's less. But I don't think you can say that of a mother. I don't want to start up with the Rambam. Let's let the Rambam talk. The sense of identity of your child and the love you have for that child grows as you spend time together. Moreover, as the child becomes more sophisticated and can turn over and can look at his hands and can get up on his knees and can crawl and can stand and can walk and can talk, as the child develops, they become more endeared to us. And then later on, further, it becomes diminished again. The love of a father and a mother to a baby at the time that they're born, the way they love him when he's a year old. On the other hand, the love you have for a 1-year-old is going to be different, and if I understand it correctly, it's going to be greater than your love you have for a 6-year-old. If you would wait 2 or 3 years, the love for the parent of the child would become so intense, it would make people reluctant or refuse to do a bris, because the father loved the child too much. You know what? I actually think that we could relate to that. I think this is true. If you have a non-frum couple, a really non-frum couple, that they're going to do a bris because Jews do a bris, every day that they delay the bris, it becomes harder for them to do it.
I've seen it a lot of times.
At the moment of the initial birth, specifically by the father, the love at the outset is weaker. He's the one who's been commanded to do this mitzvah. So the Rambam gave us 2 reasons for bris. Right? He disagrees with the Rasag. He's interpreting the Medrash differently. He doesn't want to accept that the bris milah is to fix the person. He says, number 1, bittul atayva, and number 2, because it identifies us mutually. And then he says, why do we do it when the child is a baby? Because for 3 different reasons, it's preferred. Then he concludes, why do you wait 8 days? This I'm not going to read inside. Because until 8 days, the baby is too weak to go through the bris, and it brings an ayah from animals. That the halach is that an animal till 8 days, you can't kill it. You're not allowed to use it, you're not allowed to shecht it and eat it, and so on and so on. Okay, this is Rambam. Okay? Questions or comments? Jinar Yisrael of it. It's a pasuk.
Right, so that could still be like 1 year old, let's say, and then, but when he's 8 days old, so it's not like. In other words, it still makes sense.
I'm not sure, but okay. I know from the little bit of learning that I've done, and the operative word is little, that especially when you're talking about philosophers versus mystics, Chaykim and Kubalim, they have fundamental disagreements. They have different interpretations. And it's best to try and see the differences between them than to try and bunch them together, because then we're defeating. We're not seeing the richness of it. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong. There's so many ideas. Even yesterday, we had several ideas that the Rambam says, which are so not consistent with Chassidus. We don't do ourselves a favor by making the Rambam into Chassidus. We do ourselves a favor by seeing the differences and figuring out how to join them together. You understand? So let's leave it. Point well taken. Okay, now, boys, now we're going to page 5. I'd like you to open up your books. Go ahead.
I still understand if
we skipping 4?
We did 4.
A child that let's say 8 years old versus at 8 days old, you can't compare at all. The laws, they obviously care more when they're 8 years old.
When they're
8, the child's 8 years old.
They care more. So you're agreeing with the Rambam.
I disagree.
Okay, that's fair enough. So then you don't have a question.
No, I have a question on what you said.
So I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I don't mind being wrong. I don't have an opinion. Go ahead, Shnei Zalman.
How is the Bris the main simon of a Jew if no one sees it? Isn't a simon supposed to be a sign that everyone sees it? Just like that's why they wear a yarmulke, and since to show they were Jews. So how is it?
First of all, that's a very good point. But I can't tell you how many Jews were killed because they found the Bris. How many people went to Auschwitz, and the only way they knew they were Jewish
Because they had a Bris.
was the Bris. It's happened many times in our history that for Jews to save their lives, they were Meshech and Losa. They tried to make the Allah come back. It's nit as they push. Okay, now, Rabbi say pages 5 and 6 are Tanya. And pages 7 and 8 are Torah Oed. Now, whether we learn both of these, the Tanya and the Torah, it will depend on the efficiency of our learning. I'm just going to say this now. I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to start something now, and then I'll continue it tomorrow, okay? We believe in Hashgacha Pratis, especially when Hashgacha Pratis smiles on you, or in this case, on me. I'm one of those bad Jews who learns Perek Echad Layom in Rambam. People have kindness to me. How could a mashpia learn one Perek Rambam? And moreover, that I dare tell people that I'm such a terrible sinner. My answer is because I actually believe that Rambam is supposed to learn and understand, and I find that if I do a Perek, I'm able to learn it and understand it. Three prakim is too much. Well, this morning, one of the few things I did before I got here late was learn the first 2 halachas of today's Rambam. The second halach of today's Rambam is about called Mila and Priya. And that's the Tanya. You couldn't have a greater smile from Hashem than this. The Rambam of today is exactly the same as the Tanya we're about to learn. Okay, and you should know that this is what people say is the difference between a Jewish bris and a Goyish bris. When they do a bris milah, right? I mean, basically there's loose skin over the gid. There's loose skin over the gid. And they cut it off. That's what they do. There's loose skin, they cut it off. So they have to obviously put the loose skin in a place where they don't chas v'shalom hurt the gid. That's why they use a clamp. However, moyalim protect it, but they're removing its loose skin. It's loose skin that they remove. This is called Mila. So you have to position the orla in a place where the gid is not. Most moyalim today will use a clamp, and then they just cut it off. It's not that complicated. But we have another mitzvah which is called Priya. Priya means that after you remove the skin, you have to, with your fingers, tear the skin that's left and pull it back. It's called Mila and Priya. That is very difficult to do. Moyalim have fingernails. Their thumbs are like steel. Because you have to do it with your hands. You can't do it with a knife. Now, there's an idea of doing Mila and Priya together, but it's not preferred. The shmua is that when Goyim do a bris, they don't know about Priya. In other words, different in a Yiddish bris and a Goyish bris is called Priya. So Mila is you cut off loose skin basically, and Priya is what's left. You tear out your finger and you pull it back. It's called Mila and Priya. And the halacha is Mova le'palak mol. If you don't do Mila and Priya, it's not a bris. And the hard part of being a moil, besides having shaky hands, not having shaky hands, is Priya. Priya requires skill. It takes a lot of. You have to learn how to do it, and it's not It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. There's a huge chasidus that goes along with Mila and Priya. In other words, until this point, we discussed Bris Mila based on the Rambam. First we did the Rambam, right? And then we did the Rambam again, right? That's all we did was, the very first page was Rambam, the second page was the Medrash, the second 2 pages was the Medrash. This is Chasidus. The Alter Rebbe talks about the 2 stages of Mila, the Mila and the Priya, and he explains it in Chasidische terms, okay? And let me preface. Mila and Priya. Let's read it, let's read it inside. Page 5, second. And the way we do it is read underline. Now these are bigger words so you can follow inside. V'hinei b'mila yeshnei b'chines. Circumcision has 2 components. Now physically it's 2 different actions. Spiritually it means 2 different things. Mila or Priya. Mila means to cut off the loose skin. And Priya means to pull back what's left. Shein orla gasa. The thicker orla has to be removed. Or klipa daka. And then there's a finer klipa which you don't take off, but you have to pull it away from the atara, as it's called. Okay? So the Alter Rebbe is not talking to us about the technicalities of a bris. He's speaking to us about the avoid of a bris. V'chein ba'arlas halev. A human being has a heart. And of course, we don't mean the biology of the heart, we mean the emotions, the sensitivity of a person's heart. And a person's heart can have orla, right? You may have heard the terms over your lives. There's timtum halev and timtum hamoyach. Timtum halev means my heart is stuffed. Timtum hamoyach means my brain is stuffed. There's a very big difference between timtum halev and timtum hamoyach. And the way I understand the difference, I don't know this for sure. I have a student who's spending all of his life trying to figure out the difference between timtum halev and timtum hamoyach. Timtum halev happens from something outside. I'm a Jew, I have a heart. Klipa will obstruct my heart. Timtum hamoyach doesn't happen from something outside of me. It's just my moyach goes away. No, the timtum hamoyach means nothing is stopping me. There's nothing outside of me that's preventing me from focusing my moyach. My moyach, it's from the neshama alone. It's a much finer concept, timtum hamoyach. We're talking here about timtum halev. Or orlas halev, it's the same thing. Orla means a timtum, something which blocks. So there's 2 timtums. Okay? And he explains, yesh gam kein, you have the same thing. You have taivis, gasas, v'dakis. There are lusts, there are pleasures, there are grob, there are coarse, there are crude, there are basic. And you have lusts which are fine. And to heal them, you have milo priya. The removal of the Mila is dealing with Taivis Gases. The removal of Priya is dealing with Taivis Dakes. Let's give an example, right? Yeah. What's crude Taivis? Crude Taivis, a person loves to eat a lot. A person who likes to show off, let's say, for example. Maybe a person likes to eat a lot. A person who's preoccupied with how he looks. It's a Taiva Gasa. Okay? What's a Taiva Daka? A person is a big Talmud Chacham, and he knows a lot of stuff, but when he learns, not he's showing off to you, he feels inside of himself that he's better, right? That he's great. If he's showing off, let's call that a Taiva Gasa. There are taivas, there are things that people enjoy and get pleasure from that are low. And then there are things that people enjoy, but they're very fine. You know, in Hasidus it's brought that the whole Aved of Adam Rishon, what happened to Adam Rishon from the Eitz Adas Tevera was a word called Murgash. Murgash means he felt himself. Before Chet Eitz Adas, Adam Rishon served Hashem. That's all he did. After Chet Eitz Adas, Adam Rishon served Hashem. That's all he did. There was one difference. Before Chet Eitz Adas, Adam Rishon served Hashem and he didn't notice that he was serving Hashem. After Chet Eitz Adas, Adam Rishon served Hashem and he was aware, I'm serving the Eibishter. You have in Hasidus, huh?
He didn't know he was serving Hashem.
He was so busy in the service, there was no sense of I, just the shlichus.
That's a good thing?
Huh?
That's a good thing?
Yeah. If it's healthy, it's a good thing. If it's not healthy, it's not a good thing. It's a very good thing. Biklal, the sign of a healthy person, is not paying attention to himself. A person who's a balgaiva, a person who's arrogant, besides for the fact that it's a disgusting midah, is a sign of not health. Yeah. Healthy people live. Watch kids. Kids don't pay attention to themselves. They pay attention to what they're doing. Then as we get older, we start to pay more attention to ourselves. And the more we pay attention to it, the more it inhibits us. It actually holds us back. It's not healthy. Okay? In Chassidus, something called the Ru'uma. In the end of Parshas Vayera, Avraham Avinu had a brother, his name was Nocher. Nocher had a wife, his name was Milka, and they had 12 children. 8 from Milka and 4 from a Pilegesh. The name of the Pilegesh is Ru'uma. And she had 4 kids, Tevach, and Tachash, and Gacham, and Macha. The first 4 words of Parshas Vayera. Right? So her Pelaksha Shma Ru'uma. The concubine of Nocher was Ru'uma. So it says in Kabbalah, Ru'uma means Ru'uma. Si am bittel. Ma is bittel. Like Chochma Koyach Ma. Ru'uma. Notice that I'm bittel. That I'm bittel. Bittel means I'm nothing, yeah? Ru'uma. Be aware that I'm nothing.
How is Ma bittel?
That's just a fact. It's the translation of the word. That's what Ma means. V'nachnu ma kislenu v'arin ma hu kislenu alav. Ma means bittel.
What does that have to do with Koyach Ma?
Because Chochma is the power of bittel. So let's just use this as an argument, as an illustration. There are grabba taivas, people who like to eat and to engage in materialism, and then you have a person who's what's his whole life is dedication, his whole life is service. He just notices himself. So the way Hasidus would argue it is that every klippa starts with that. Noticing yourself is the first step towards liking yourself. And liking yourself is the first step towards giving excuses for yourself. And giving excuses for yourself is the first step towards, I'm not giving any excuses anymore. This is what I am. It's a chain. You understand? But the beginning of it is a dakas dikataiva. So the Bris Mila has these 2 dimensions, Mila and Priya. Go ahead.
Isn't there confidence that comes out of it though, like a good confidence?
Yeah, of course. That's complicated, right? When is it good and when is it bad is a subjective thing a little bit. And that I'm reading more of the Alter Rebbe, please. 4 lines from the top of the page. Umol v'leipora k'ilu leimo. If a person does a bris, that means he removes taivas gases. But he doesn't remove taivas dakis. He allows himself to be inexact in fine areas. The halacha is it's not a bris. Why? Mipnei safe, because ultimately, adayin, it remains that nekudas pnimius halev, the inner point of the heart, that means the deepest levels of the neshama, he mechus is covered. Because the deepest levels of the neshama need a higher level of refinement. And this levush sak dak, this thin, this fine garment, which is compared to a sack, which I don't have time to explain, affects that even though on a conscious level, even though on a behavioral level, even though on a practical level, I'm a very, very good Jew, but in terms of my essence, in terms of my finer connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the fact that I have not done Priya, that I haven't removed the finer Orla, leaves my neshama bebechinas golas v'shivya. It doesn't have an opportunity to express itself. Okay, so we're going to stop now. We started the Tanya. Okay, so the second point of today's class is an introduction. First of all, I described to you the idea of Mila and Priya Pashat, how it is Bagashmis. It's today's Rambam for those who are learning Perik Echad Layoim. And we began the conversation about this concept of 2 brises. You'll see in the next tomorrow, it is actually 2 different sukkah. One pasuk says, Umal temes azach. You have to remove your own arla. And the other pasuk says, Umal Hashem Lecha, that Hashem removes your arla. And the Alter Rebbe is going to argue the Orla Gasa we have to remove ourselves, the Orla Daka we cannot remove without Hashem's help. Right. Okay, I'll see you later. Thank you for listening.